Shortly after Urza Saga rolled off the presses in Modern Horizons 2, Legacy underwent a paradigm shift. So many cards from that set had an impact on the format that land was overlooked for quite some time. And then Kamigawa Neon Dynasty saw fit to produce Kappa Cannoneer, and a new archetype graced Magic's greatest format. I'm talking about 8-Cast. Hello and welcome to Eternal Durdles. I'm your host, Zach Clark. Today we're scrutinizing a Legacy deck that's been ratcheting up the metagame for the last 2 years, but continues to be one of the format's strongest and most financially viable options. I've invited recent 1K winner, David Marchese, to break down the ins and outs of this powerful yet resilient artifact-based beatdown deck. David is both an experienced pilot and one of the deck's early adopters. With strong finishes in both large events and a renown in his local meta, David is one of the few people that has more experience with the deck than myself, and he has the results to back it up. He's here to offer deep and critical insights into this powerhouse.
To kick things off, let's introduce 8-Cast. It's an aggressive yet resilient legacy deck that combines elements of affinity and artifact-based strategies. The deck revolves around casting robots at breakneck speed while offering long game resistance against other value-based strategies. Fundamentally, the play pattern revolves around early game disruption with cards like Chalice of the Void and Force of Will. Combine those with efficient beaters like Patchwork Automaton, Kappa Cannoneer, and Urza Construct tokens, you have a serious recipe for success. Alternatively, some starts leverage Emery, Lurker in the Lock, and zero-mana artifacts that draw extra cards to outcard your opponent over the course of several turns. As the game continues, cards like Thoughtcast and Thought Monitor will refill your hand for the cost of a single mana, and cards like Kappa Cannoneer and Psy Master Thopterus will drive the final nail in the coffin. It's a fast deck that can pivot to a more mid-range plan and end the game fast if not disrupted. The following synopsis on the deck will be extremely useful if you're interested in learning the deck, and should be equally as useful if you find yourself across the table from it. What truly sets 8-Cast apart is it plays two of the strongest lands in Legacy, Urza Saga and Ancient Tomb. This land combo, along with several free artifacts, can threaten any opponent's life total in just a few turns if left unchecked. Urza Saga and Ancient Tomb can produce 2 constructs over the course of 3 turns. Ancient Tomb makes this all possible a turn earlier than the designers likely intended. Often, on the 4th turn, as the second construct is ready to swing, you're presenting lethal damage or at least an impossible race for your opponent, as Shadow Spear can be tutored and be put into play for free, upping your artifact account and creating a pseudo evasion with trample, swinging your life total well out of death's reach thanks to the lifelink. Urza Saga also offers disruption in the form of several 1-mana artifacts that can blank your opponent's game plan. Soul Guide Lantern and Grafdigger's Cage stops any graveyard shenanigans you may face. Pithing Needle exists as a silver bullet against cards like Wasteland, various Planeswalker, and other menacing activated abilities. Either Spellbomb to bounce Murktide, Merit Lages, and other problematic creature, Urza Saga will make players give second thought to any old or new 0/1 mana artifact. Next up, let's delve into the raw power of mana acceleration. Ancient Tomb, Lotus Petal, and Mox Opal are your ticket past the early stages of the game. These cards allow the deck to reasonably create mana turns earlier than other decks as they release the deck of Legacy's normal low mana curve deck building restrictions. This is akin to driving on roads with no speed limits. You can power out 6 and 7 mana spells as early as turn 1 thanks to the acceleration that they offer. What's more is that thanks to your affinity cards and constructs caring about how many artifacts you have in play, your petals, opals, and baubles are all doing double duty by being worth 2 mana for your affinity spells and pumping up your construct tokens by merely existing on the battlefield. While Ancient Tomb allows you to generate 2 colorless mana at the cost of 2 life.
Small price to pay for the smiting of one's enemies.
And jumping forward through the normal development steps of the game is almost always worth the trade. of any resource, especially when Shadowspear can undo the life loss of Ancient Tomb. I'm always happy to pay a life to cast Patchwork Automaton or Chalice on 1 on my first turn. Value and mana acceleration are wonderful, but they can't win the game alone. 8cast also leans on some unique beaters and synergizing creatures to shut the door on the opponents before they can catch up to your accelerated game progress. As previously mentioned, Kappa Cannoneer was the catalyst that elevated this deck from Fringe Brew to format-defining matchup. Kappa's improvise mechanic works similar to Infinity to allow Chalice of the Void and your baubles to serve double duty as mana rocks. Once Kappa resolves, there's very little most legacy decks can muster in terms of removal by the time this mechanized turtle takes over the game. Unlike Fatties and some other deck, the fact that Kappa Cannoneer becomes larger and unblockable with each artifact that enters the battlefield means it can't be held off with chump blockers until a solution is found. Opponents need answers immediately, sadly for them, and happily for you. It has Ward 4, meaning that your opponent will have to tack on 4 colorless mana onto any targeted spell or ability targeting it. Although not common, Kappa can come down as early as turn 1. It's always a joy to watch your opponent scramble for an answer as Kappa quickly reduces their life total. Combine this card with Master Thopterist to get 2 triggers for each cast artifact and Emery, Lurker in the Locks, imitation of Library of Xandra, and you have a threat base that demands board wipes or threatens to come back stronger each subsequent turn. New to the deck, but printed at the same time as Kappa, is Patchwork Automaton. This little brother to Cannoneer is only 2 mana and often comes down on turn 1. Ward 2 puts us in a similar role as Kappa, but as a more consistent early play. It only grows when you cast artifacts and doesn't become unblockable. It will also demand swift answers, as it can often end a game early. Let's not even mention having 2 of them on the board at the start. What's the old adage? If you're blocking, you're losing. While I do agree with that statement and the philosophy of action over reaction it advocates, 8cast is a deck that can play the long game. Sai and Emery supply air support and redundancy, and the rest of the deck is mana efficient and value based enough to dig you out of otherwise extremely unfavorable situations. Adawara Sorin City and Aether Spellbomb can supply you with the break you need to retake the game if positioned correctly. Of course, you are a blue deck, and that means Force of Will. Its blue splash into the color pie is one of the things that makes this deck viable in an otherwise extremely unfriendly Game 2 and 3 environment. Cards like Harkle's Recall, Collective Ouphe, Meltdown can ruin your day if you don't keep your defenses up. Force of Will can solve these neatly without dedicating any extra sideboard hate. This simple fact allows the deck a lot of hate pieces that can live in the sideboard and surprise opponents not expecting a particular silver bullet. Another benefit of Urza Saga is being able to tutor out a list of potentially game-ruining 1 and 0 cost artifacts that would otherwise demand 2 through 4 of the additional 15 sideboard slots, leaving yet more room for answers after game 1. This flexibility keeps your opponents guessing and allows you to adjust your game plan on the fly. Obviously, keep mull decision making is an incredibly complex topic, so I'm only going to cover game 1 in the blind decisions. 8cast is a proactive deck, so make sure your opening hand has a clear game plan. Whether that's Urza Saga and Ancient Tomb, turn 1 Patchwork Automaton, Chalice, or Emery, potentially with Force of Will backup, are all great options. Avoid hands with tons of payoffs and little ways of getting there. If you follow these steps, you too will be piloting 8cast to great success.
David, thank you once again for this amazing overview of the deck. On a final note, 8cast has 0 reserve list cards. It's a deck that's cheap by comparison to the rest of the top tier Legacy meta. Most of your expenses will be found in Force of Will, Mox Opals, and Chalice of the Void. If you have the patience to keep your eyes peeled for reprints and good deals, you can pick this deck up over the course of a few months without losing your shirt. Another great thing about this deck is that it's very easy to convert 8cast into Mono Blue Painter. This can allow for some diversity in both experience and playstyles. One thing is for sure, this deck will be a powerhouse for years to come. And with Urza Saga, every 0 and 1 mana cost artifact is going to be worth looking at. You can invest in this deck and the format without worrying too heavily about an impending ban ruining the deck and thus the format for you. Just remember to play around Orcish Bowmasters, and you can quote me on that. Hey, check out this other playlist we have of all of our deck techs. You're going to love this. It's going to give you a lot of insight into the format, and you know what? Like and subscribe to the video while you're at it. Thanks so much. Have a great day.